No worries.
Got it.
Now that
Great.
you can hear, we can say Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
It's great to see everybody. May 2024 be a good year. All right, so this is a meeting of the steering committee of the Vermont Climate Council. The agenda is in the chat. I'll share my screen just so you can see it. What we really need to do is figure out next week with the council. That's the big goal today, is to figure out next week. If we have a sec, let's look at this sort of draft agenda we're looking at for January 29th. But we do have one more meeting before then to really confirm that. The second thing we need to do, and just leave a little time with at the end, is the subcommittee nomination process based off that process document. And Jane can send those documents through. Let's take a look at that. We want to create some space. If anybody's joining us from the public who wants to comment at the end of the meeting, we have some space for that, and we're trying to finish up by the half hour. So that's the goal. Before we dive in, any quick questions on that goal in the agenda? Okay, great. Let's do it. There are, as is typical, we try to approve the minutes from last time. They're here. They're nice and short. Any concerns about last meeting's minutes? Anybody need more time to look at this? Okay.
I would just abstain since I was not at that meeting.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Jared. All right. Hearing no concerns, let's consider those approved. All right. So what we need to do is figure out a plan for next week, given that we ran out of time in the council meeting in December to do many of the issues. I put together with Jane a draft agenda for Monday's meeting. And the things we need to decide today are that agenda and whether it should be an hour and a half or whether we should extend it out to 2 hours. It's tricky to do because it's last minute, but let's look at the agenda, see how we feel about that. We need to think about if we do need a second meeting, because our sort of process document does talk about 2 meetings for substantive issues like what we want to do with transportation. Well, frankly, all 3 of the issues that we need to deal with, the resilience and the annual report to the legislature. So here's some potential times. If we want to do that, let's pull the trigger on that and call for a second meeting on Friday. So these are the 2 biggies that I wanted to work through, or we need to work through together. And then if we have a moment to look at the January 29th, great. So would it be helpful for me to look at this agenda with you all right now quickly to say, these are the 3 things that need to happen? The 3 things that need to happen next week, we have to look at the legislative report. And as a council, the goal is to sign off on that. We hoped to have 2 times to do that, one to give some feedback and a second to give a final sign off. The legislative report is 1, the resilience priorities and the response to the speaker's letter, which again is material we were going to look at in December. We didn't get a chance. And then the transportation document, again, we were going to look at, we didn't get a chance. We need some time for public comment. So if we do it as a 90-minute version, it essentially means we've got 25 minutes to do the legislative report, a half hour to look at the resilience piece, and 20 minutes to look at the transportation piece. If we are comfortable scheduling a second meeting for Friday next week, that means we would get a second bite at all of these to look at how the comments that the council makes in the Monday meeting get incorporated into a revised version, and then do a final sign-off. So that's what we got, the 3 things we have on the agenda. There's another version, which is 120 minutes, which just gives you a little bit more time on all of those. All right, I'm going to stop sharing for the moment. Can we see each other? But I'm happy to pull stuff back up. Jared, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, David. Yeah, a couple of thoughts. I think the first is that I was not able to attend the last council meeting, but given how packed that agenda was and the remaining pieces, my inclination would be to try to reserve more time so that we can get through everything and reserve 120 minutes.
Mhm.
If we end up needing less, that's better, but it would feel not, if we do 90 and we aren't able to get through the agenda again and things keep getting pushed back, I worry about that, unless there's people who have hard stops and just aren't going to be able to do it, so we'll have trouble with quorum.
That's
and
the
I don't, but I think my lean would be towards the 120 version for that reason. The other thing that I would request in either version of the draft agenda is to make clear that whenever we get to what is titled on these draft agendas legislative report, that be more clearly labeled draft legislative report
Okay.
in either version of the agenda, because we'll review a draft that counselors can then provide feedback on. So I just think it should be labeled as such.
Okay. That's easy to do. Thanks. Jane?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a comment based on the way you characterized the second meeting next week, because I think that's a discussion for the steering committee today, which means that the only thing that in my mind has to be approved by a deadline next week is the legislative report, which is due to the legislature on the 15th. So the idea to have a second meeting could be as simple as to come back just for the legislative report to approve that with revisions made after Monday's meeting. And so, and then the steering committee should consider the length of the second meeting and if anything else would be considered at a second meeting beyond the legislative report, or if the resilience and transportation recs would wait till the end of January.
Thanks, Jane. Right. Right. So it could be, given that we have a meeting on January 29th, that we use that January 29th meeting to confirm the other two pieces. It also could be you do it in a second meeting next week. I think that's very much how you all want to play this as a steering committee. When we think about this balance of adding a little bit more time to Monday, adding a meeting on Friday, how to make all that work, and thinking about the timelines we have, what are people's thoughts? Are you inclined to add a meeting on Friday? Are you inclined, as Jared is, to extend as well Monday a little bit? Where are people? I'd be interested to hear other steering committee members. Kelly?
I think the response to the speaker's letter is pretty important. The session's already started. I would hate to put it off any longer than we've already done. So for that reason, I do think having a Friday meeting next week would be helpful, because I do think we need to have that second look opportunity. Given that the agenda for Monday's meeting doesn't have decision making involved, having a longer meeting might be good, even if it did mean that we might lose a few people in the last half hour. But again, it's like having a quorum isn't necessarily required because we're not making decisions, but we're providing feedback. So I'd be up for that personally, but I also know that we're talking about 2 meetings next week, and that's a lot to ask. So I'm not firm on that, but I do think we should try to do the legislative report and the approve the response to the speaker's letter on Friday next week. I think those are both really important. I'm not sure about the transportation, how time sensitive that one is.
Thanks, Kelly. All right. Julie, similar thoughts or different?
And I was just gonna offer there, I think we could also should consider whether we write to the legislature and tell them the report we'll have the report to them by the end of the month, as opposed to January 15th. I'm not necessarily anticipating any particular action that they're intending to take. And I think we could credibly say we've got this meeting scheduled for the 29th and are envisioning the Climate Council will take final action on that date and deliver it by the 31st. which would provide capacity regardless of which way we go in terms of how lengthy a meeting we need to look to for Friday, and the sort of opportunity for people to provide comment on the draft report, maybe outside of Monday's meeting as a result of having a little bit more time to sit with it.
Thanks, Julie. So just to understand, that option would entail not having a second meeting next week and using our meeting on the 29th to do that final decision-making around these documents.
Well, I don't want to I don't know about for all of them. I mean, Kelly just flagged the concern of wanting to get the speaker letter or speaker response out this week potentially, or next week potentially. So, but as a way to try to minimize if we decide we're going to meet on the 12th, trying to minimize what's on the agenda for that
Got it.
meeting.
Got it. And so the legislative report could be pushed to later if we gave them the signal, like, we'll get you by the end of the month, but we're moving as fast as we
We've
can.
done that in several other reports that we have due to the legislature. Just said we are working on it. We haven't lost sight of it. We haven't forgotten it. We are working on it, and we'll have it to you by date certain.
Right. And we could provide a little friendly, and here's our resilience response. Okay. Liz and then Jared.
A couple of just clarifying questions. I know we had a draft legislative report that went to the council before the last meeting where we weren't able to go over it. Do we have responses already from councilors, Jane, to the draft? I'm just, okay. And do we have an update yet? Because I know there was a few highlights in there. My memory is just because we were awaiting the December meeting. Is it otherwise complete to get out to councilors soon?
I updated yesterday. There are three pending updates. A rulemaking section, the biomass and transportation. Rulemaking's been updated, biomass will be updated, and transportation is still pending.
Okay, so close, but not quite. Because what I was wondering is, it feels like under our process document, in the event that it were relatively straightforward to get in the annual report, it has been warned, it was provided. It's at least conceivable to me that folks would have few enough changes that the council as a whole could agree that in this circumstance, moving it next week is appropriate, even with only a single discussion, given that it was on two different agendas and the document was provided. So I don't want to leave that off. I don't want to take that off the table if it's possible. And I otherwise agree with Julie that in general, these annual reports, although important to do, whether they're done 2 weeks early or 2 weeks late, has never, kind of changed the course of the world. So if that were a way, especially to consider and finalize the letter to Speaker Kowinski, then that would seem potentially appropriate to me as well.
Okay, great. So we got a number of potential ways to solve this. Jared?
Yeah, I think a concern that I have would be, I've been really thinking about, and I thought that we had kind of identified the January 29th meeting as a real kind of level set meeting, our second in-person meeting together to step back, do some big picture, planning leading up to the next climate action plan, work planning together. And my worry, especially given recent experience with packing too much in agendas, is that meetings become unwieldy. And if it's possible, my preference would just be to kind of leave that meeting with the structure and kind of focus that it originally had, rather than punting multiple pieces for final decision until the end of the month, both in terms of just the introduction and flow of that meeting and the kind of competition for attention and agenda space. So, and all else being equal, I think it is good to meet the deadlines set by the legislature. So I'm happy to go with the will of the group, but my preference would be to do the 2 meetings next week and have those 3 items on the agenda both days, so we can try to work through them and get them to the legislature.
Great. So let me try to summarize in the spirit of time here. There's a number of pathways here. If I were to take everything that you all said, one way to do this is we do our meeting on Monday, make it a 2-hour so we have a little bit more time to deal with all three and really get some good input on all three. We schedule up a Friday meeting. We prioritize perhaps the resilience conversation to really make sure we get that one out the door. We attempt to get the other ones. We have a backup plan of using our January 29th meeting for those items, whether it's the legislative report or the transportation piece, if for whatever reason we just can't do it in a short meeting on next Friday. That might be a pathway that sort of says our intent is to get as much of this done as we can. If we don't, we have this backup plan. We can write to the legislature and say we didn't quite get it done. We'll get it done in a couple of weeks for the legislative report, the transportation thing as well. But we really for sure want to try to get that resilience piece out the door at the end of next week. Does that seem like a reasonable approach? Like, let's schedule the Friday meeting. Let's make it relatively short. And if we can't get to all three, we've got a backup plan to use the 29th, even though, as Jared said, it's not the preferable thing. How does that sound? Friendly amendments or changes to that? Thumbs up? Kristen, go ahead.
So I just wonder, maybe there's a hybrid of that. I'm just looking at my own personal schedule next week, which may be different for other people, but I think I would likely be able to make some portion of an expanded meeting on Monday if it was at the end. But I wonder if we try to expand the meeting on Monday, if we're going to schedule 2 meetings next week and then, with the 29th meeting as well, we schedule that for 30 minutes and take our 2 kind of most time sensitive, which to me from this discussion and from other discussions sounds like the letter to the speaker and the report, finalize those on Friday, get those done on time. It seems like that could be done in a 30-minute, potentially a 30-minute, maybe it's a 1-hour meeting on Friday, and then move what I think will likely be a broader discussion, potentially a more robust discussion of the transportation initiative, schedule that on Tuesday to preserve, to Jared's point, or the 29th. Sorry, I'm just making up dates now. But to Jared's point, like trying to preserve as much of that existing agenda and time as possible, but also, recognizing, I think trying to cram all 3 of these into even 2 meetings this week seems like something that we may not, it is unrealistic.
Okay. Yep. Liz?
Yeah, I'm good with all of that and the proposal. And it may be maybe this is the answer, especially if the non-administration members of the steering committee feel that there's really no way. If the legislative report really did go easy, then I would still put on the table that we as a steering committee could, if people here agreed, consider letting the council know that since it was on the prior meeting and warned, and the council all had opportunity to provide comment both before in December as well as now, if there happens to be quick discussion on that, then great, we have more time for the other items. And we could choose to pass it or, finalize it on Monday.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Liz. I have one just question on that, Liz, though, is there is new information coming into it, those 3 missing pieces, and
Yep, but that was true when we considered it last time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
That's no different than it would have been. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So how about this? Shall we just say this? On Monday, we extend out on the second, at the end of the meeting, we extend out a half hour. We can extend that invitation. We recognize that it's less of a decision-making half hour and more about input on these documents. Second, we do schedule up Friday. I think we should look at our calendars right now. or if you decide you'd want to like doodle this with the full council, I'm tempted to just schedule it right now because we don't really have the time to do that. I see Jane shaking her head. Yes. There's two options that were put in the calendar, 11 a.m. or at 3. I'm a strong proponent of the 3 just because I'm busy at 11, but I'm just curious if we were to do either, can't do 3, but could do 11. Okay. All right. I may be doing it. Just as a quick, if all steering committee members could just throw in the chat real quick, the sort of 11 versus 3 p.m. Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. For Friday, we're talking about, that would be really helpful to know with you all. Okay, it seems to be a trend, can do 11, can't do 3. So I wonder, Kristen, your camera just got a little bit off. So I wonder, oh, Secretary Clauser, you're the one who can do the 3, but not the 11. Interesting. Okay. I think we should make a decision right now, though. And Secretary Clauser, would you be okay not being at that Friday thing if we do it at 11?
Yeah, I might be able to move something to join at 11:30, but recognizing I'm the only one that
Okay.
can't make that work potentially, I think it's fine. I can try and send a delegate too if I need to.
Would people be up for a half hour of like, we're doing decision-making, folks? Would that be okay? Would that just be unrealistic? Would we ask for an hour's sort of time? I mean, the benefit of half hour, you're more likely to get everybody in that slot. Quick feedback right now from you all, half hour versus an hour on Friday.
I feel like it's hard to know until we have the meeting Monday, how quickly
How quick it'll go. So why don't we reserve an hour? Okay. Great. So reserve an hour. It looks like just from this just amongst you all, though your chair is not available, more of you are available at 11. I'm hesitant to be the one to make that call, but I will say that is the evidence that's in the chat right now. Okay. And what else? I think that's it, right? And we are prioritizing for Friday the resilience and not taking off the table that we would get to other ones as well. And we have January 29th as our escape valve to deal with the things we don't get through in terms of final approval next week. That work? Okay.
I do have, I don't know if we need to get to it now. I know we were scheduled only until 11:30. I have 2 pieces of feedback, one on the draft agenda for the 29th and then one on the subcommittee process. I don't know whether it
Let's do subcommittee process and let's hold the 29th. Jared, if you want to send that, just email to Jane and me. And then we'll pick that up in our next steering committee meeting altogether. That sounds good?
Yep.
So if we're comfortable extending Monday, 11 o'clock on Friday, prioritizing resilience on Friday, but not discounting the fact that we could either on Monday or on Friday say yes to some other things like the legislative report. Okay, all good? Great. So let's talk about the process. Jared, do you want to just jump in real quick with what your reactions are to it? Everybody else, all the documents are linked in the calendar invite if you want to take a quick peek at that. Jared, what's your reaction?
I think overall the proposal, the process, the documents look good. I just had one minor suggested language change, which is I think there's multiple places in 2 of the process documents that talk about pairing youth members of subcommittees with adults. And just given that many of the youth members who are on the subcommittees are adults, I feel like that language could be a little bit patronizing. So it might be better to say something like with non-youth members or non-youth appointees
Love it. Okay. Thanks, Jared. Nice. I'm just pulling up right now so everybody can see it. The essence of this, and Jane, you can narrate as I pull this up. The essence is we kind of need to get rolling on this now. And that's why that's why Jane really wants to get any feedback that you have on it before the Climate Action Office dives into it. This is what's in the process document. Here's what Jane is putting out there as a process to operationalize that. There's a little bit more detail in our process document about the types of membership. There's 2 documents attached as well, which are the surveys, sort of the forms that would be used to make this real. Jane, anything else you want to say about it?
That's great. Thanks.
Okay. This is super rushed, so if there's anything that folks want to say right now, this is a great time to do it. I think if anyone wants to throw up a red flag right now and be like, don't go forward, Jane, this is a really good time to throw up that red flag. Otherwise, if there's sort of thoughtful input like what Jared just gave, that can be done offline too, or, in an email to Jane. But any red flags right now on this process, based on what you've seen? Okay, great. So what, Jane, you can take from that is you have an okay to go forth and operationalize. Steering committee members, feel free to provide some friendly amendments and thoughts over email. Okay. Super. I think that's it. As we mentioned just now with Jared, in the agenda is a sketch of what the January 29th meeting looks like. Feedback over email will be great, or otherwise we'll pick that back up as a full steering committee in our next meeting, which is unfortunately just a week before. So particularly if you have thoughts on the who in people presenting, that would be very timely to do in the next few days.
And just to be clear, in terms of just so we're kind of doing right by the open meeting law, and the feedback on the agenda should not go to the full steering committee. It should just go to Jane and you, David,
Correct.
and you'll incorporate it or not, and it'll be up for discussion the next time we meet.
That's right. Anything that's beyond like scheduling meetings should not be
Yep.
a group email. Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly, for the thing in the chat. So I just put this back up to show you, this is what the details in the agenda, if you want to go back and look at it. This is what we're thinking. Okay. Great. Anything else I'm missing? Liz, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, super quick. Jane, are you working with the subcommittee chairs between now and our steering committee meeting to finalize that afternoon piece? I just want to make sure we have enough time to make that meaningful, because it looks like that's the subject matter subcommittee oriented topic sessions. And so if you need, I guess I would offer, if you need any help on that or feedback, I just want to make sure that we get that in a good place for a great meeting without waiting until the steering committee meeting the week ahead of time.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the process for lining that up with subcommittees internally, so happy to think about that. David and I just started to put meat on the bones yesterday based on previous work planning conversations that Julie and Jared had helped support around presentations, but we'll do that.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah. All right, folks, we're a little over. I will say we had offered for public comment. If there's anybody here who's not a member of the steering committee who has some comment, please, this is a great moment to do it. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late on that. But anybody here who would want to comment on what we've just been talking about? Okay, great. Super. All right, thanks everybody. You will see the changes in your calendars for Monday and for Friday. And thanks for helping us think through this. We'll see you on Monday. Take care, everybody. Yeah, bye-bye.